On a very warm night in July of 1988, I was sitting alone at a table in a crowded ballroom in Atlanta, Georgia. The room was very hot and the music was loud. And it was the first night, the kickoff party of the Democratic National Convention. Now, I have been a politics junkie all my life. So at 27 years old, to be a delegate to the Democratic Convention, I was thrilled to be there. This would be like being a football fan and being at the Super Bowl, okay? But in that room that night, I actually felt like I was out of my league. I was from an obscure little place, Lorain County, Ohio. I knew very few of the delegates. They were mostly much older than me, and they all seemed to know each other, and I didn't really know any of them. And I was sitting alone at that table, and the music was playing, and it was hot, and I thought, maybe this is the part where I just leave. And just then, a man who did know me made a beeline for my table. His name was Jack Wolf. He was about 70 years old. He was the director of the Board of Elections in Lorain County, and that's how I knew him. I had volunteered on some voter outreach projects he had done. And every time I had seen Jack, he had been exactly the same. Smiling, laughing, telling every corny joke imaginable. He liked to talk about how he was a blue-collar guy with a high school education, and yet here he was, the director of this big department. And I remember meeting with him in his office one time, and that thing was packed with family photographs, all these smiling kids and their parents. And I thought, man, this guy has got it all, right? He's got a job he loves, and then he goes home every night to this lovely, warm, extended family. No wonder he's smiling all the time. But that night, he was pointing his finger right at me. "What are you doing sitting here alone?" he says. "I'm on the rules committee. First rule, no dead asses. Get up and dance." I'm like, okay. So I got up on the floor with Jack. Now, he was not an energetic dancer. But after just a few minutes, the sweat started to form on his forehead, and I yelled at him over the music, "Jack, it's so hot. Maybe we should just sit down." He says, "No, I'm on the rules committee. I know, first rule, no dead asses. I heard you the first time. Okay." So we keep dancing, and after a few minutes, the sweat is pouring off of him, and his face is looking kind of pale and pasty. And I yelled, "Jack, seriously, you don't look well. We should sit down." No, gotta keep dancing," he says. And I said, "Well, with this heavy hair, I think I'm done. I'm gonna call it a night." And I said goodnight, and he waved goodbye, and I walked off the dance floor. I got about halfway to the door, and I heard kind of a commotion behind me, but honestly, I didn't think anything of it, and I just went up to bed. And I came down in the morning, and one of the delegates I had met the day before came over to me in the dining room, and she took my hand, and she said, "Oh, Jackie, I'm so sorry." I said, "Well, what about?" "Well, I heard you were the one dancing with Jack Wolf when he died last night." I said, "What are you talking about?" And I looked down, and the Atlanta Constitution newspaper was sitting there on the table. Headline, "Delegate Dies." Oh my God, Jack Wolf had had a massive heart attack on the dance floor, apparently just after I stepped away. But the story going around the Ohio delegation was she was the one dancing with Jack, and I went overnight from being the most obscure member of the delegation to being the most notorious. And I gotta say, there's something about that I think Jack Wolf would have found kind of funny. But I did feel sad that this nice man had died alone among strangers so far from that lovely extended family he had home in Ohio. So when we got back home, I went to Jack's funeral. And I learned two very interesting things. The first thing I learned was that Jack Wolf knew when he got on that dance floor that he had a serious and dangerous heart condition. But he got on the floor anyway. And the second thing I learned is that Jack Wolf had no family at all. Never married, no children, no nieces, no nephews. All those pictures I had seen in his office, those were the families of people he had worked with or candidates he had helped elect around the state, just people he liked. And he'd say, "Send me a family photo," and then he would frame it and put it in his office to remember the good times he had had with those people. Now, since that evening in Atlanta, I have had many occasions where I've again been in a big room where I felt out of place, or I didn't know anybody. Sometimes it's a big party where I don't really know anyone. Sometimes it's a wedding where everybody else is a couple and I'm there alone. And there will come that moment where the music kicks up and those couples start making their way to the floor. And there's part of me that feels so alone that I want to go hide in the bathroom or just leave. But then I remember some excellent advice I got from a kind man on a warm night in Atlanta. And I don't leave, and I don't hide. I just get up and dance. Okay.